I still remember the scent of jasmine drifting through the curtains the morning my mother told me I was going to be married. It was the summer I turned 19, and the heat pressed against the windows like the world itself was sweating with secrets. I was sitting at the breakfast table, half awake, stirring my tea with no real intention of drinking it. My mother sat across from me, her eyes fixed on the steam curling from her cup. Then, without looking up, she said it. "Your father and I have decided. You're getting married." My spoon clattered against the porcelain. I wanted to believe I misheard her, and blinked. "What?" She looked at me, calm and final, like she'd just announced we were having guests for dinner. "To Rami. The engagement is next month." Rami. I barely knew him. 27, a family friend's son, someone I had spoken to maybe twice in my life. Once at a wedding, where he nodded politely and walked away. And once at a family dinner, where he spoke only to my father. He worked in import-export or something vague and forgettable. I remembered his eyes, though. Dark, but not in a kind way. More like the kind of darkness that hid things. "I don't want to marry him," I said quietly. My mother sighed, a long, practiced exhale that women in my family had perfected for generations. "This is not about what you want. This is what's best for you. He's a good man. His family is respected. You'll have a stable life." Stable. As if I were a piece of furniture being moved into a suitable room. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow. My sister Leila heard me but didn't say anything. Maybe because she had cried that same way when she was married off at 20. Maybe because she knew words wouldn't change anything. My father didn't ask for my opinion. He didn't need to. In our home, his word was law. He announced the engagement at dinner 2 days later, between bites of lamb and rice. Everyone congratulated him. My aunts beamed. My cousins whispered. Rami didn't even come to the table. I stared at my plate, unable to move. In the weeks that followed, I watched my life shrink. Fittings, jewelry, endless visits from women who smelled like heavy perfume and judgment. They tugged at my hair, measured my waist, pinched my cheeks. They asked nothing about me. Only about the colors I would wear, the dowry, the size of the banquet hall. My mother kept telling me how lucky I was. "So many girls would kill for this match," she said as she adjusted a necklace around my throat. Felt like a collar. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But where? With what money? What future? Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a hot Thursday afternoon, a week before the engagement party. I was in the courtyard, watering the jasmine bushes. I heard voices from the garden wall. Rami and his cousin. They didn't see me, and I stood frozen as Rami laughed and said, "She seems obedient." "That's enough. After the first kid, I'll get my own place. She can stay with my mom." Obedient. That was all I was to him. Docile body. Placeholder. Womb. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat in the dark and realized that if I went through with this, I would disappear. Not all at once. Slowly. Quietly. Bit by bit until the girl I was, her laughter, her dreams, her fire, would be dust. That terrified me more than anything else. I had $312 in a savings account I opened behind my parents' back. A friend, Jenna, who had moved to Chicago 2 years ago, had once said, "If you ever need a way out, call me." So I did. Jenna didn't ask questions. She just said, "Get here. I've got a couch." The day I left, it was still dark outside. 4:15 a.m. I packed one bag. Jeans, 2 shirts, my sketchbook, and the tiny silver locket my grandmother had given me before she died. I left my phone on the nightstand. I left a note on my bed. "I'm sorry, but I have to live my life." The cab driver didn't ask why a girl in traditional dress was heading to the airport alone. Paid him in cash. I didn't look back. I remember the first deep breath I took once the plane took off. Felt like I was breathing for the first time in years. Jenna met me at O'Hare with open arms. She looked different, freer somehow. She lived in a small apartment with peeling paint and mismatched furniture, but it was hers. I slept on her couch, worked at a coffee shop downtown, and spent nights watching YouTube videos about interior design and entrepreneurship. I knew nothing about business. I just knew I had taste. I could walk into a room and see the potential. I started posting photos of DIY redesigns I did for Jenna's place on Instagram. I watched tutorials, read books, messaged strangers who were doing what I wanted to do. There were days I regretted everything. Days when I missed home, even the parts one hated. Days when the loneliness felt like a second skin. But every morning I woke up and wasn't someone's possession. That was a win. Jenna introduced me to a woman named Clarissa who owned a small design studio. She needed an assistant. I lied and said I had experience. She hired me anyway. I learned everything. Paint palettes, mood boards, client management. I stayed late. I volunteered for everything. I watched, listened, absorbed. Clarissa noticed. One day she said, "You've got an eye, Leila. Ever think about doing this on your own someday?" I almost cried. Nobody had ever asked what I wanted to do. Not really. 6 months after I ran, I stood in front of a mirror, wearing jeans and holding a client folder under my arm, and I didn't recognize the girl staring back. She looked stronger, sharper, more awake, smiled. I wasn't a bride. I wasn't a runaway. I was becoming someone new. And I was just getting started. When I stepped off the plane in Chicago, I had nothing but a small duffel bag, $312 in cash, and the kind of fear that wraps around your spine and won't let go. It wasn't just the fear of being alone in a foreign city, or the fear of being caught. It was the fear of being forgotten. By my family. By the life I left behind. By myself. Jenna picked me up at the airport. She hadn't changed much. Still the same wide smile, still smelling like peppermint gum and dry shampoo. She hugged me tight and didn't say anything for a long time. And in that silence I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Safety. Her apartment was small. 1 bedroom. The couch was scratchy, and the windows didn't close properly, so the wind howled in during the night. But to me it was heaven. I wasn't somebody's future wife anymore. I was just me. The first morning I woke up at 5:17 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor with a cup of instant coffee, staring at the city lights outside, and I promised myself one thing. I would never go back. No matter how hard this got. No matter how lonely or poor or scared I felt. I would not go back to being property. Jenna helped me get a job at the cafe she worked at. It was nothing glamorous. Aprons that always smelled like milk, rude customers who snapped their fingers when they ordered, long shifts on my feet. But every dollar felt like a brick in the foundation of my freedom. In the evenings, while Jenna scrolled through dating apps or watched reruns of old sitcoms, I would sit in the corner of the couch with my sketchbook. I've always loved spaces. How a room can hold a feeling. Back home, I used to rearrange furniture in secret, sketch floor plans for fun. Imagine how I'd design my own house one day. I didn't know what interior design was called back then. I just knew how to make things feel beautiful. One night, Jenna came home to find I'd moved around her whole apartment. I painted an old side table a soft coral, hung 3 photos she had buried in a drawer, and layered throw pillows in a way that made the space feel warmer, alive. "Damn," she said, standing in the doorway. "You did all this today." I nodded, nervous. "Do you like it?" "Leila," she laughed. "You're a freaking artist." That was the first time I let myself believe I could do more than survive. Over the next few months, I transformed Jenna's place. Then her neighbors. Then a friend of a friend's studio. I charged almost nothing, just enough to cover materials. I didn't care about money. I cared about proving to myself that I had something to offer. That I could be more than a girl who ran away from home. I started posting photos of the transformations on Instagram. Before and after shots. Little videos. Color palettes I fell in love with. I didn't expect anything to come from it. It was more of a digital diary. But people started following. Asking questions. Begging me for tips. Slowly something shifted. Jenna introduced me to Clarissa, a designer who ran a boutique interior studio downtown. Clarissa was tall, sharp-eyed, always on her phone, and intimidating as hell. I wore my best thrifted blazer and tried not to sweat through it. She looked at my Instagram for 10 minutes, then said, "Okay. You've got an eye. I need an assistant. Can you start Monday?" I wanted to cry. Instead, I nodded like I'd been waiting for this all my life. Working for Clarissa was no joke. 12-hour days. Snobby clients. Furniture orders gone wrong. Emergency fabric changes at midnight. But I loved every second. I learned how to talk to clients, how to manage timelines, how to match patterns with purpose. Clarissa wasn't warm, but she was honest. And honest was more than I ever got from my family. She saw something in me. And one day, after a particularly stressful install where I'd saved the day by improvising a centerpiece out of leftover tiles and wildflowers, she handed me a check and said, "Leila, you ever think about going solo?" The thought made me nauseous. Me. Alone. But that night, I stared at the ceiling and whispered the idea out loud. Leila Interiors. Sounded insane. Sounded impossible. Sounded like freedom. So I started. Slowly. I took freelance gigs on weekends. Cheap ones. Broke college students' new moms' bachelor pads. I'd save up scraps, turn Craigslist furniture into statement pieces, and document everything. I didn't have a website. Just a Gmail address, a logo I doodled myself, and a heart that wouldn't stop pounding every time someone asked for a quote. The work kept coming. Word of mouth. M's. Referrals. I said yes to everything. I worked through the flu, through heartbreak, through burnout. I slept 4 hours a night. But I was building something. Brick by brick. Pillow by pillow. One day a tech bro messaged me through Instagram. Said he liked my vibe. Asked if I could design his loft. Almost said no. Felt too big. Too serious. But I said yes. I treated that loft like it was the most important space in the world. Every fabric. Every shelf. Every bulb. I poured myself into it like it was a second skin. When he walked in, he stared at it for a long time, then said, "Wow. This feels like home." That was the moment I knew I could do this. He told all his friends. His girlfriend. His girlfriend's cousin. Suddenly I was booked 3 months out. I had to quit the cafe. Then, eventually, Clarissa's studio. It was terrifying. But also felt like flying. I officially registered my business that spring. I sat at the DMV, holding the paperwork, and cried in the hallway bathroom because it felt so real. Leila Interiors. Name. My brand. I got an accountant. A web designer. A used Honda Civic that barely ran but took me from project to project. I bought business cards and handed them out like candy. Year 1, I made just enough to cover rent, gas, and ramen noodles. Year 2, I landed a contract with a mid-tier developer staging new condos. They gave me 3 to start with. I staged them like museums. Like texture. Story. I left handwritten notes on the nightstands. Candles burning in the corner. They sold out in 2 weeks. He called me back for 15 more. By the end of that year I hit 6 figures. I moved into a 1-bedroom in the West Loop. Not fancy but full of sunlight. I decorated it with leftovers from jobs. An antique mirror, a reclaimed wood table, a velvet armchair in seafoam green. I slept on clean sheets. Ate strawberries out of glass bowls. Lit candles for no reason. Sometimes I'd sit by the window and think about my old life. About the girl I was. Trapped. Silent. Obedient. I wanted to reach back and hold her hand. Tell her she was brave. Tell her she was right to run. I didn't tell my parents where I was. Not yet. The shame, the pain, the betrayal, it all still lingered. But one afternoon I got a DM from a private account. It was my sister. Her message said only, "Are you safe?" I typed back, hands shaking. "Yes. Are you?" She didn't answer for a day. Then she wrote, "I'm not. Can I come to you?" She showed up a week later with 1 suitcase and the same hollow eyes I'd seen in the mirror 2 years before. Her husband was worse than mine would have been. Controlling. Cruel. Cold. She had no money, no degree, no plan. Gave her a job. Let her crash on the couch. Taught her how to draft budgets, pick patterns, speak to clients. Slowly, her eyes lit up again. We were rebuilding. Together. Now I run a full team: designers, assistants, warehouse managers. We've worked with celebrities, magazines, national brands. We donate part of every month's revenue to women's shelters. We host workshops for immigrant girls who want to start their own businesses. Sometimes someone will ask, "What's your story? How did you make it?" And I say, I ran. Believed. I worked like hell. Chose myself. I was supposed to be a silent wife in someone else's house. Instead, I became the woman who builds homes for others, and for herself. And the best part is, I'm just getting started. Had been 5 years. 5 long, unforgiving, beautiful years since I ran away. Since I rewrote the narrative that was handed to me and started living a life with my own name on the cover. The day I got the invitation, I almost threw it away. A cream-colored envelope, no return address, just my full name written in handwriting I recognized instantly. My mother's. Inside was a simple card. My cousin Amal was getting married in Istanbul. A traditional wedding. The kind that would be full of judgment, whispers, and watchful eyes. The kind I had escaped. I hadn't spoken to my parents since the night I left. My sister kept me updated now and then, but I avoided anything that might drag me back into that version of myself. And yet, I held that card for hours. I kept turning it over in my hands, like it could offer answers if I stared long enough. Jenna, now my business partner and best friend, walked in while I was still holding it. "You're going, aren't you?" she said without needing to ask. I nodded slowly. I think I have to. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want an apology either. I just wanted to look them in the eyes and let them see who I had become. I flew in 3 days before the wedding. Istanbul felt like a dream I barely remembered. A strange mixture of home and ghost town. The air smelled the same, a mix of spice and sea. But I no longer belonged to its narrow alleys or its closed windows. I belonged to something I'd built with my bare hands. I stayed in a hotel near the Bosphorus. Modern. Elegant. Designed by a firm I admired. My suite was filled with soft blues and white marble, and when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My hair was longer. My skin had a glow I hadn't seen before. My spine was straighter. My eyes harder but not colder. Sure. The day of the wedding, I wore a slate-colored silk dress. Simple, elegant, with a pair of heels I could walk miles in. I didn't wear flashy jewelry. Just a pair of diamond studs my first big client had gifted me after I completed her beach house. Curled my hair. Lined my eyes. And as I stood in front of the mirror I whispered, "You did it, Leila." When I walked into the wedding hall, everything stopped. The music. The conversations. Even the air seemed to pause. Dozens of faces turned. A few widened in shock. Some narrowed in judgment. My mother stood near the front, her hand at her chest. My father, seated by the groom's family, stiffened like a statue. But I kept walking. I greeted the bride, kissed her cheeks, complimented her dress. And then I turned to my family. No one said a word. Until my uncle Amal's father broke the silence. "Leila," he said with a hint of awe. "You look successful." Smiled. "I am." My mother approached slowly. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. Her eyes searched my face like she was looking for pieces of the daughter she once knew. "We thought you were dead," she whispered. "I was," I said gently. "Now I'm alive." We didn't hug. But we stood in silence, and somehow that felt more honest. My father refused to look at me. He kept sipping tea like it was armor. I spent the evening moving through the crowd, smiling, listening, accepting compliments from relatives who once said I was wild and disobedient. One cousin asked if I'd gotten married in America. I laughed. "No, but I own my own home, so I guess I'm committed to something." Somewhere between the cake cutting and the dancing, my mother found me on the balcony. She stood beside me, arms crossed, staring out at the city. "You ran from everything we taught you," she said. He nodded. "Because it wasn't teaching. It was control." She said nothing for a long time. Then finally, You were brave. I don't know if I could have done what you did. That admission cracked something open in me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. The space. Room for something new. I don't hate you, I said. I hated how small I felt. I hated being told who I was before I had a chance to find out for myself. She looked at me then, and for the first time in my life, I saw guilt on her face. You were always different, she said quietly. We didn't know what to do with that. I just needed you to believe I could do something more. We stood there a little longer. Then she said, "Come visit the house before you leave. Just for tea." I agreed. Not because I wanted to be their daughter again, but because I wanted them to meet the woman I had become. The next afternoon I went back. The same house. Same doorway. Same rug in the hallway. But this time I didn't shrink. They served tea and fresh bread. My father said little, but he didn't leave the room, and somehow that felt like a step. My mother asked questions about my business. She looked at photos on my phone of the homes I designed. She lingered the longest on the one of my studio, with my name painted across the glass. Before I left, she pressed a small velvet pouch into my hand. "This was your grandmother's," she said. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet, worn but still shining. She would have been proud, my mother said. I didn't cry until I got back to the hotel. I sat on the bed, holding that bracelet, and let the weight of everything crash into me. Years. The fear. Courage. The loneliness. The beauty. The price of becoming yourself. And the miracle that I had survived it all. When I flew back to Chicago, the city greeted me like an old friend. Jenna picked me up again like she had 5 years ago. Only this time I got into the passenger seat of my own Range Rover. We laughed. We caught up. She asked, "So, was it worth it?" I thought about my parents' eyes. My sister's healing smile. The gold bracelet. The silence finally broken. He nodded. Yeah, it was. A month later I gave a TED-style talk at a women's empowerment event. I stood in front of hundreds of women, many of them immigrants like me, and told my story. I didn't soften the truth. I didn't leave out the hard parts. I ended with this. Sometimes the people who raised you will tell you who you are. But only you can decide who you become. I was meant to be someone's obedient wife. Instead, I became the woman who builds her own world, and helps other women build theirs too. They stood and clapped. But it wasn't the applause that stayed with me. It was the young girl who waited after the event, eyes wide, voice shaking. She said, "If you can do it, maybe I can too." I looked at her, smiled, and said, "You absolutely can." And in that moment I knew. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was the beginning of hers.